Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Courtney Gold. I'm going to be your moderator today for today's webinar. We have our DevOps Roundtable, and we are really super excited to introduce Mrinal from Transact Campus. He's the chief architect over there. We thank you again for joining us. I know everyone, we have such busy schedules, so thank you for taking your time. We also have Bill Manning from JFrog. He's our solution engineering manager, who's going to have a conversation with Mrinal, and they're both here to answer your questions. So they're going to tell their story. They're going to be here to answer your questions. Anything you want to know, please ask them in the Q&A chat box at any point in the webinar. And at the very end, we'll be able to answer more questions as well. But other than that, I'm going to let the two gentlemen take it away. Go ahead, guys.
Thank you so much, Courtney. I really appreciate it. And Mrinal, thank you so much for really attending this today. I know your schedule is super busy like mine, but I really look forward to our discussion today. We've had some touch points in the past, and it's always enjoyable. So, without further ado, I'd actually just like to kick this off and keep it as simple as possible. I will say before that, I'm going to shower some love on you here. But, Transact Campus has been around for a long time, and you guys were founded in 1984. You've helped over 12 million students through, 1,400, select universities over time, for various aspects of being able to make life easier. And I'm sure over time, those transitions have changed in the way you've operated from the beginning all the way to you are now with your software stack. But I'd love to get some insights to kind of kick us off a little bit about you and how long you've been with the company and, the digital transformation. And you and I shared a little funny anecdote beforehand, which I thought was really awesome. But yeah, please go ahead. And, I'd love to hear some insight from you. And then we'll start our journey talking about the path and the reasons and all the good stuff that we've talked about in the past.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad to be here, and this is fun. So just kind of, as you said, Transact has been around for 35 years. It's been a long journey. They have gone through a lot of acquisitions, and so basically, it was not the same company before, and there's a lot of these acquisitions that have been done. Most recently, we were part of Blackboard, the big learning management system company, and then spun out of that. I have been with the payment side of business, which used to be called Hire One, CashNet, various other names. But most people in California know the name because that's how they, that's the program that takes their money from when they're in a university. But really, that's the payment side of the business. We really have three parts: Campus ID, which is opening doors, your laundry machine, all of that, stored value cards and such. Campus Commerce, which is ordering your food, mobile ordering, which is great. During the pandemic, we kind of boomed on that. Mobile ordering was great. And then the student payments, which is your bill, rent, parking tickets, whatever else. So those are kind of the three parts. The funny thing is, it all came together. All of these people are from different companies, and they started separately, and they kind of came together. And the nice thing is, they flow together. Like the same card does all of these things for you, and and the way I like to describe it is, it's once you get out of the classroom, we control your experience, or we help you with your experience. Right.
Now, with all those multiple companies over time, I'm sure each one had its own set of stacks and stuff that they utilized for all their build processes. Was there a journey that you guys went through, or maybe on integrating all those together and coming up with commonalities that allowed you to be operational, or are they still a little bit more operationally separated in terms of how they do things?
Yeah. So well, it's on the continuum, right? We started with everybody just kept doing what they were doing, and now we're kind of consolidating. And the interesting thing is, well, I'll tell you the little story, right? When the payment side got acquired and we started doing stuff, most of the time what happens is the larger company that acquires you says, well, let us tell you how we do things. And then they tell you how to do things. In this case,
I've been there.
Yeah. So in this case, it was awesome. Well, my boss then at Turan, he said, well, this is how that's done, and you guys do it some other way. And obviously we bought you because you're doing good things. Let's figure out what you're doing. And then we took the best of both worlds. The nice thing about that is we got to learn a lot, and we actually were allowed the time to learn a lot post acquisition, and that was great. What came out of that is this whole idea of DevOps, because before that, DevOps was just something that you read in books. It didn't happen here, right? So this was 2016, I would say. We started talking about DevOps, automating. There was the initial take was, oh, somebody will do DevOps and we'll just do what we're doing and it'll happen, right? That quickly
find the standard, and then everybody will have to apply to the standard.
Right,
That kind of
right.
idea.
Yeah. Well, not even apply. Like we just, you just copy paste this code and it'll start working.
Oh, okay, there you go.
Yeah. So that's what they thought would happen. I mean, every developer thought that's what would happen. Then it turned out to be like, the good developers try to learn, right? So they said, well, yeah, I can copy paste this, but it doesn't do what I want to do. I want to go look at the code and figure stuff out. So they started building, simple things like we started using Kubernetes and Helm charts. Well, we started with Docker Swarm because that was king that day. At the time. Kubernetes was, I don't even think it was like 1.0 or whatever. So, but anyway, so stuff started happening where actually the developers got in. So DevOps truly started becoming DevOps, talking to the ops and figuring out, well, what do you do for monitoring today? Figuring those things out. So it's taking time. It's not there yet. We have parts of the company that are still working in the old system. But yeah, you have mavens in each team that actually learn the stuff and teach their peers.
Funny, it's that whole idea between like theory and practice. I always make the joke is I want to move to that place called theory because everything works there. Right. That's always the place I'd like to go. But the thing is, the evolution of DevOps, like you said, has been for a lot of companies, especially ones that are either steeped in methodologies that have been around for 35 years. Maybe they started off there and they've actually watched the evolution of everything from even the internet, right? You guys are pre-internet. There was back when ARPANET or when this machine was still viable, during that time period, and that the evolution of this stuff has actually been amazing because I, myself personally, watching, this happen over, the course of many years, obviously with this on my face, been doing this for a long time. And, the thing is that the difficulties that we see as a company with a lot of companies, either new companies or companies that are been around forever. I mean, I have one customer particularly, they've been a company for 100 years, right? And they've actually seen, there's a lot of companies like that have seen the evolution of everything over time. Now, you guys, we made the joke before about, like when this all started, probably the original software stack. I love the joke you told because then immediately in my head, I thought about redundancy. But, originally when these were all done, how were they originally done in the early days there, right? I mean, think back, right? It was the guy at the desktop, like you said before. One guy, compile the source, run the disk, right? Get it out there. The redundant, HA in this case was Bob, the guy sitting next to him, or if you wanted a cluster, it was the cubes. And now, the thing is that, how long have you guys been using our platform? And really, what was the inflection point in the company when you guys were sitting around talking and going, this is great? Was it one of the divisions that already had it and then everybody just kind of jumped on? Or was this one of those, we have a problem and we need to solve it, or we're getting big and out of control, which is sometimes I hear and says, we need some sort of a level of consistency within our organization. What was the inflection point for you guys that really kind of set it apart, that said, now we need to do some sort of level of binary management, we need to implement security, all these kind of things? Right.
So that was about 3 to 4 years ago, I would say. Before that, it was really, Artifactory was a Maven repo. That was the Java, only the Java developers use it. And our stack is Java, C#, Node.js, and obviously the front end stacks, Angular stuff. So that's pretty much everything, right? Every major thing is covered. About 4 years ago, I would say we started using the on-prem version, and we decided, hey, we're going to take one decision out of everybody's requirement. They don't have to decide this. If you have a library or a binary or Docker, whatever, goes into Artifactory, goes into JFrog systems. Let's call it that, right? And that was resistance. There's like, I have to write my code. I have to figure out how to log in. I said, well, if you are not logging in today, you have to do that right now, right? You would have to. Everything goes behind a closed system so that we can, our code needs to be private. So that's where it started. There was no security, nothing. Like, we didn't talk about security. It was mainly to do with, hey, make it work with one source of truth. That then led to, and so the nice thing was at that time we were thinking, hey, once we have the source of truth, we can tackle all of these other things. Um, the magic that happened there was, well, it's in JFrog, and JFrog has these products. Let's just implement those. And our next step never had to be next step other than going and doing a purchase order, and that was the next step, and it just worked, right? So I think I told you this before, is like it was magic for us because we said, oh, we just checked this box and all of our code is scanned with X-ray. If we do this other thing, we get watch notifications. So
that's one of the hardest things, by the way, I hear from a lot of companies, by the way, is number one, implementing security, both at the level of, authenticating users in some cases, right? Making sure that your source is controlled more often, and then getting into the binary management side. And, and the thing is also too, like last year alone, there was a 650% increase in supply chain attacks, right? It's one of the biggest threats, and especially somebody like yourselves, dealing with, financial and information, that's definitely something you keep an eye on. And just for curiosity's sake, how many developers and like how many locations are these teams? I mean, are they located in one place? Are they more globally dispersed? Like, especially now with the past 2 years, I see everybody's dispersed. I mean, God, I'm working from home right now, like still. It's like
no. So it's about 180 developers, give or take. We've been growing pretty rapidly, so I would say we're going upwards of that number. But the developers are mostly in the US, and so East Coast and Connecticut, or California, or Phoenix. These were the three main offices. The offices that are mostly gone now. Everybody is all over the place. I always work from home, even if we had offices. Limerick in Ireland and Chennai in India. These are the three main centers. But we don't, everybody's remote. So we've basically, the moment one person goes off remote, you have to set up a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting, and then it doesn't make sense after that.
And when you were designing the infrastructure to accommodate all these developers and tool sets and stuff, I want to get into your tool set soon, but was Artifactory's replication and the ability for you to do that part of the consideration when you're doing it? Or are you guys more of a GitOps style where you're utilizing, like one central build method, and then, basically when somebody checks in, it's all automated? Or, just some explanation about behind your stack and how you've actually also kind of set it up so that it's easy for all of your developers to kind of coalesce, in the virtual world now, especially, and even before that, this was still probably something that you guys needed to address, by having these kind of globally dispersed teams. Can you explain some of that to me? That'd be fantastic.
Sure. So in the before time, everything happened in the Git repo. Like, the moment you checked in something and merged to main, it was considered delivered. And then there was no CD. It was really somebody went and compiled stuff. At some point, we decided, we need a CI/CD pipeline. It was still manual, like somebody had to kick it off and everything. And I would say some parts of our company, the legacy, the things that we still support that are monoliths, still have that, where the compilation happens. It's automated, but it's still a human running one command instead of 25, but it's still there, right? So it's scripted, not automated. Let's put it that way. But then there's this other pieces that are more modern, that are, I would say, 75 GitOps, 25 BinOps. So, it's mostly you commit to Git, your dev server gets rebuilt the moment you commit, or a pull request. Every team decides their own triggers. We don't have a standard over there. But what we do have is the moment the binary is built and it's in JFrog, the Artifactory, you have to promote that. Like the moment that gets, you create a new one, you start the process from again. It starts in dev, QA, load test, everything else. So I would say that whole part is GitOps. The only thing is promotions are not GitOps based yet. They're all, they're still.
Is it more manual based? Or are you guys using like a CLI or an API, or is there some other things that you're utilizing?
No, it's scripted. It's still on manual. It's scripted, but it is a scheduling thing, because we have the way this works is interop is a problem here, because we have some legacy stuff that, it's an all or nothing push. You can't do the feature zone. So let's say you have a payment system that needs to go live today. The front end is all automated, but you still have to schedule it because the back end won't be ready at the same time. So that's why it's manual. It's not manual because we have, we chose it that way just because of the fact that we have legacy dependencies.
Are you using Artifactory for your SDLC? Have you designed your repositories as such to kind of gather that information, to kind of push it through its cycle? And has that been really beneficial to the way you guys do your work in
Yes,
your
yeah,
organization?
that has been like, so I can't stress this enough. Virtual repos, you got to use virtual repos.
It's been referred to as magic by some of our customers, but
Yes,
I
yeah,
want to hear
that's magic. Yeah,
I want to hear your take on that.
that is magic for us. So here's what, the way I look at it, right? We have this ops team that does what I call debugging, quote unquote, and whenever problems happen, right? What they want to see is what is available for me in production. Let's call Docker containers, right? They want to be able to pull a Docker container called students, let's say, and when their systems are logging in, they only see what's in production. So we have our tiered structure for repos, and we only have 2 tiers. We don't have the 3 or 4 recommended tiers that you have in one of the diagrams. But we say everything goes into your dev tier, which we call snapshot, just because of older naming from Java days.
The Maven naming.
Yeah,
right?
Maven naming. Yeah. So your Docker container goes to whatever payment snapshot, and all of our dev instances have access to that. The production one only has access to release. So if your Docker container, the student version 5 got promoted to release, all the dev and all the prod see it.
Okay.
But 6 is still in dev, so only the dev see it, not the prod. And so when you're debugging or when you're rebuilding production, you don't accidentally promote version 6 out there, because that's supposed to be only be in dev. And when people are doing debugging from the production instances, like if you have to log into a system and actually figure out what's happening, and you do a Docker pull, you're getting the right one, or at least something that's vetted for production.
And what are you guys using for your CI tooling? I mean, is it now, like I said, there is some stuff that's automatic, there's some stuff that's manual, some stuff that's scripted. Are you standardized on one CI platform, or is it now a combination? And does our platform help you in that respect?
Yeah, so it's so we're not using the full build tools in JFrog. We actually just use it for X-ray stuff. Azure DevOps is our primary, and that's kind of nice, right? We didn't have to pick something. We just said, keep doing what you're doing if you figure out what's better. So most tools use Azure DevOps. There's some GitHub actions happening right now, and then we do use the Bitbucket pipelines for some of the other tools. But
Hey, Mrinal and Bill, we actually had a question come in, so I figured we can go ahead and answer it really quickly. It's how do you handle sub build? For example, Artifact A is from Team A. They have their own CI that builds it and puts it into Artifactory. Artifact B from Team B is built from its own CI. Then Artifact C depends on A, B, and also sources from C with the third CI. How do you coordinate something like this?
What's funny is
like
that is and I'm glad somebody asked that, because this is actually a very typical thing, right? And a lot, for us personally, just I'll let Mrinal answer this question absolutely on how he does it. But this is actually one of the typical things that we discuss, as part of our introduction to Artifactory and our products, is that idea of cross-team dependencies. But to actually hear a real-world example of how you guys do it, because utilizing some of the components that we have that allow you to do this kind of level of abstraction, to have cross-team dependency, where maybe one team produces something for another team that's utilized by another team and then turned into a service. I would love to hear how you guys handle not only doing it, but also the juggling. Has this helped you in terms of being able to automate? I love the fact you're using the term automate, because that makes my heart kind of swoon, because I'm all about automation. But please, I would love to hear your real world behind this. And also too, we'll talk about security next, because I think that's a very important thing to discuss. Definitely.
Yes. So the answer to this is there's 2 answers to this. So one for software only. We actually use Artifactory as a publication mechanism for internal as well as external, right? If you're publishing outside, goes there, internal as well. And as far as I talked about GitOps, so basically your library or whatever you're including in your manifest, you only have so if team A made something that's artifact A, that doesn't show up until until they're done. And we'll say if it's in dev, then it's always, we have naming conventions and use Semver and everything else. So we know. But as long as the dependency is making sure that they're including it from whatever the repo is, the dependencies are pretty easy for us. It doesn't take away the fact that you sometimes have to talk to the other team. After all, you're in the same company. But what happens is it's usually like the first few rounds they talk, and then after that it's I mean, there's two components to this. Like when the artifact exists, you're guaranteed that it's been vetted and done certain things, right? Yeah. Well, when it exists with a certain version number, if you still have snapshot behind it or something else, beta, alpha, it's not ready for production yet. No other teams can use it. So we have a convention. I would say that's still loose. Like certain teams will talk to each other and say, "Can I use your beta for now?" Because we just want to get ahead. But that's a conversation. Infrastructure is an interesting deal where we don't use Terraform yet in Artifactory, but if we're doing components that go, version 5 requires an Azure Kubernetes service this version or later, or a Helm chart requires that. We try to build in the dependencies on our CD pipelines, where we say, this is a hard part because those go stale pretty often, right?
Yeah.
Azure made a decision, this other team made a decision, and they don't line up.
Now, John here actually in our chat actually asked, how do you identify the latest version of the artifacts? And actually, that was going to be one of my questions to you leading in. Do you guys use any of the metadata components that are inside of Artifactory for those kind of decision matrix?
Yes,
when you are trying to get latest version?
Yep. So Docker is easy because you always tag that latest. Yeah, but some of the other ones we actually have, it basically is a Jira key, and you can max on that, right? You can search for max on that. So that's an easy way to do it. So the latest ticket that was worked on is actually the latest version.
Oh, that's fantastic. So you are when you are like promoting it, are you applying a value then during the promotion process that says, now this is in latest, and you said you do a query to say, here's this field, give me the max value. That max value designates the latest version to include in my build process.
Yeah. So we don't do it as a max latest on the publisher side. It's what do you consider the latest? Hey, the consumer, right? So if team B is consuming team say A's artifact, it will say, the way I define latest is your latest Jira ticket, right?
Gotcha. Are you using Artifactory query language? Are you using the Artifactory query language?
Correct. Yeah. AQL on that. Yeah.
So you are using AQL and using the API as a direct request as part of your build process. Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah.
Excellent. That's good. And it says.
Well, I will say not every team does it, but one or two teams do this mechanism.
Well, that's very cool, because that's one of the things I like to preach about. And I know that John actually in our chat has another question that says, do you trigger builds for Artifact C automatically if there are updates to Artifact A and B? So it sounds like interdependency upgrade models in this case.
No, not yet. We basically, well, today we do notifications, nothing else, right? So the build really that triggers is send somebody an email. Well, it's not an email, but it's a Slack message or something. But no, we just haven't been courageous enough to do it.
So are you guys using the Slack app yet for Artifactory, or do you guys have your own? Oh, you are. No. And your integration, so you'll be using the integration with all the extra components.
Yes.
What do you think so far? And this is actually going to segue very, very rapidly into security, because I want to talk a little bit about security, since you did bring up how you're using X-Ray, and as part of this, and I want to talk about things like Log4j, right? I mean, this has been,
that's
and maybe
top
how
of
you
mind.
utilize. And how you utilize, if you use Artifactory to track that down and stuff. But let's start off at the other part. Let's talk, before we jump right into the security aspect, any other additional thoughts, and then how you use it for, your builds and shift left, the shift left joke again, Bob, but shift left, and then also remediation, because I think this will kind of be a nice segue if you want to talk about that. And we can talk about, Log4j as part of this, but, is this integrated at your just developer level level using our ID plugins at all? Are you utilizing this as part of the CI process, and even down to future state, maybe delivery and stuff like that? We'll talk about that later. But if you could talk to me about the importance of security, number one, because we all know, like I said, the importance, 85 to 95% of the software you build is someone else's, right? And 75% of that is either old, outdated, or has one vulnerability.
Right.
And also, by the way, another happy feature thing that's coming up soon is, you mentioned Terraform. We are in the process of releasing our Terraform repository, just so you know. And then also too, I don't know if you guys are doing anything with iOS and stuff like that.
We are.
Just to let you know. Oh, just to let you know, native Swift support. We've been working with Apple, and
Awesome.
so we're going to actually have native Swift support very soon.
Awesome. Yeah, that would be awesome. That we're just waiting for that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Apple team, the mobile development team is completely separate from everybody else, just because
it's going to be exciting.
The tooling is completely different.
Oh yeah. But please talk to me about your security aspects, and
sure.
Like I said, and then give me your little story about maybe your journey with the Log4j and getting that unfortunate message that suddenly one of the most commonly used libraries in the world and is now turned out to be one of the most detrimental and scary.
Yeah. So I'll start with where we kind of stopped with the the dependency pushes, right?
Please.
So when we do just internal dependencies, we have this whole thing where we're not courageous enough to kind of just include our own. That applies to our external dependencies. So we rely heavily on the lock files, the package.json lock, or whatever else the locks that the products do. We rely heavily on that. That being said, just how we dealt with the JFrog, the Log4j thing. We said, hey team, you're doing Java, are you using JFrog? Yes, most of the teams. If somebody said no, and it was like there's certain client facing, like we deliver jar files to the client, those were not in JFrog, and they were just they're 15-year-old libraries. So the nice thing about those were they didn't never upgraded, so they were security by obscurity. And the ones that we had using Artifactory, we were able to go to X-ray, and we some of them were not scanned because they didn't check the box, but we did make them check the box and scan them later on, and we found that they were not using the latest. I mean, they were using 1. whatever. And so the good thing was we were able to satisfy ourselves really quickly, and the fact that we never the better thing was that we actually didn't have a 2. whatever version was broken. But if we did, we would have seen it immediately and done whatever was needed to be done.
Do you use the search tool inside of Artifactory to kind of search your builds and to kind of see if the touch points and how we actually correlate everything together?
Yes, so we did. You do that. The problem was because if you're not indexed and your builds didn't get indexed, then you don't have that search capability. So those we just had to go through the watch, the watchers and say, what's the, I forget what you called it, but the composition. So the circles that
software
show,
composition analysis, where you can kind of see it all.
Yeah. So
Very
we did
cool.
that manually, and that's the cool, like I would say giving that to your CISO is the best. So you don't have to generate your own reports. You just say, here's your login. If you have a problem with something, go look here and then ask me the question, right? So it's you enable a lot of the people that are not really technical. And I mean, I wouldn't say not really technical, but they're just not day-to-day technical, right? They don't know how to. They would have to Google all the commands to run to figure something out. You give them this tool that really is their dashboard, if you will.
Absolutely. These are also the same. I give another talk that I give publicly with one of the other one of my constituents here in my at JFrog. We give a song about the songs of ice and tire fires. It's the idea of cargo culting, and sometimes the higher level executives, they have these conceptual components that they pull in, including things like, hey, I saw Log4j is actually this is a thing. Twitter's blowing up. The world's coming to an end. Are we using it? right? And we try, for us personally at JFrog, we actually went ahead and released an open source tool even for customers that aren't using us, that can go and troll through all their stuff and say, oh yeah, we need to address this. But also too, the level of the CIO or the CSO, that wants to have that kind of data, giving them the ability to access that is pretty phenomenal, right? We get that feedback a lot to say, I need a quick report, I need to get our legal team is asking, what licenses are we using for our software? We need to do a license audit. We get this a lot, from customers that are like, oh, hey, my CSO says we need to do this. Can you do that? And, knowing that, have you implemented shift left, at the developer, at least for some of your developers, or is it an ongoing process?
It's an ongoing process. So we are lefter than earlier, but not as much. But yeah, so just talking about the IDE integration. So it's fairly commonplace, I would say. I can't guarantee that everybody's using the IDE integration, but especially the JavaScript development, TypeScript, JavaScript, those guys use it pretty often because their library set just grows, exponentially. You include one little thing to, show a button, and suddenly you have like 500 things in your node modules.
Yeah, baby, that's what it's all about, right? MVM is just like you throw a party for your close friends, and they invite their friends and their friends. And so you have 500 people at your house, and you're like, how did this happen?
But that's that helps a lot for us not having to deal with any of this out in our CI/CD pipelines. We just say, you deal with it, you're guaranteed to pass if you have all of these green, right? So we do have policies that we created and not implemented all of them yet. I mean, we're kind of in the process of licensing policies, because security is easy, it's good or bad, good or evil. Licensing is slightly harder because all of them are good for certain situations. So we kind of grew to a point now we have to make, I call this my grown-up decision, where I have to think about licensing now.
Put the big boy pants on.
And pretty much, we didn't even think about, like, there was no other tooling. We just said, hey, JFrog does it. We set up, like, make the policies are encoded in these watches, and then you forget about it. I mean, well, forget about it as in, it's now a legal decision. It's not a technical decision anymore.
With the ID integration, did you have any resistance from your developers, or did they find it valuable? Because I always jokingly say that our ID integration, my favorite part about it, and I jokingly say that it's binary shaming, because the way we color code the actual third-party transitives, nobody wants to be that person, right? Everybody's like, who checked this in? And be like, why would I pull this down? Did I, suddenly I have all these potential threats. Who was it? That whole idea, and I call it binary shame because nobody wants to be that. I almost figure it sometimes it's almost like a reinforcement thing, that you don't want to be that developer that checks in. Like I said, one of the problems, like I come from a development background, from way back when, and one of the problems that with the industry and changing the scope and shifting the scope is I'm guilty of this, and most developers who've been around forever and still to this day, is we have this inherent trust, this blind trust in the actual dependencies that we use to make our job easier, right? Find a function that concatenates a string and produces some value that I need to reference, and I want to, I don't want to write that. I want to go concatenate string. Oh, that works. I'll use it, right? And it brings in all its friends once again, and suddenly I have this blind trust that I trust that developer to do his job and not be anything, and 90% of the time they're right. But the thing is that those developers depend on dependencies, and those dependencies depend on dependencies, right? It goes further down the chain. When we start talking about things like SolarWinds, I mean, when SolarWinds happened, it really brought this to the forefront, caused the US government to say, we need to improve nation's cybersecurity. That was from a fourth or fifth level transitive dependency. And the problem with the thing is, like I said, that blind trust we have is the fact that, the attacks these days are happening in the supply chain. Like I talked about, the 650% increase. The thing is, though, when we think about this, the barrier to be something who creates these nefarious things that could cause problems, like what happened with with SolarWinds, or UA agent, which was one of
Right.
the ones, right? For the reason why is that it's the community is accepting, right?
Yeah.
Hey, you want to be part of our community, and you develop, and you don't even have to be that savvy of an individual to code this stuff, to be honest. You could sidecar it into something, and people are like, okay. But has this helped your developers with a level of skepticism? Number one, I hate to say it that way, but we now have to become more skeptical of the things that we utilize. But has this helped them kind of feel a little better about, like, I can make sure that when I bring this in, that I'm not going to be the guy that causes our company, nobody wants to have Transact Campus as a headline, right?
Yes.
Transact Campus, most trusted name in monetary and commerce for students, releases 70 million records.
Right.
It's like,
yep. Yeah. I mean, you call it a company killer event, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Did it help in any way? Did it?
Yeah.
Did it help?
So I mean, the idea really is that it's the comfort is not, the part that we're talking about is the comforting part is not at people that are thinking about it is not at the developer level per se. It's the dev managers that actually deal with this most of the time, where they're their QA and all of that stuff. So what they're saying is, hey, I want how did I put it? Like, the easiest thing to do is the right thing, right? That's what we want to do. Is here's an easy way, include here's your npm rc file. Make sure that's how you pull your npms, and as long as you do that, our infrastructure will take care of it. And that's what that's a JFrog. It's a Artifactory npm rc. It has your you got to put your credentials and everything else. But once you're done, it's a fire and forget thing. Like, you did that. Now you make sure that you're keeping track of the policies and everything else in JFrog, and the X-ray pieces are taking care of it. So that's the comfort, where we say you at least comply. And now if you've got to do something that's special, that you're getting an error over here, but you really, really want that library, yeah, let's talk. Let's deal with the exceptions, in a human pipelines. But everything else is automated.
I like that. I think I like that terminology. I think I'm going to steal that from you, by the way.
Sure.
I like how you have human pipelines. That makes, I hear this all the time, right? I do a lot of talking and a lot of talks, and I work with our customer base all the time. And it's true that there's a division of labor that happens over time. There's this, everybody now wants to automate, right? Increase velocity and how they do things, increase the security footprint they have to make things easier, but also, like you said, automate. And there's still a human factor behind all this that still needs to be attributed to, such as the human pipeline. It is an essential part of what you do. And the thing is that, for you guys, has our platform helped you kind of bridge that gap between the human pipeline and the automated pipeline?
Yes.
Making it more symbiotic, maybe?
So the biggest thing is having a UI to all of these things is, so without Artifactory, there's some tools that do this today. If you had a question or a doubt, like, hey, are we using Log4j or something? You had got to call a developer. He writes code on a green screen. I'm just making this up, but and a bunch of stuff scrolls by, and then he tells the CISO, no, we're not using it, or yes, we're using it, whatever, right? So you just had all of that happen. Now compare that to, the CISO can go and see a screen that shows him a picture that says, yes, we're using it, or no, we're not. It just makes the mental model become so much easier. It's not all the time that I think there's pieces that you have to rely on the technical people, but at least there's a default to go to. Hey, let me just at least check here, right?
Yeah.
And that's what Artifactory has become for us. It's the place that you check first, and then you can still not be satisfied and go ask people, but it's at least a place to look at, where your default is not, I got to wake somebody up before I can make a decision.
So if I were to ask you, in terms of the journey you've had for your DevOps experience over time, because we have about 20 minutes left, so I kind of want to give you, what would be the top 3 things maybe that you take away from, when you take a step back, right? When we have that, everybody has that introspective moment where, sometimes it's hard because, we are in this constant perpetual motion machine that we call software development, right? It's just ongoing, and having that break to kind of step back and say, you know what? These are the things that when I look at what we've done as a journey, that were really kind of, things that really made the difference. But, and this is going to lead into my next question, which is going to be, what are your kind of your plans going forward for the say next even like 12 to like 24, 36 month roadmap that you have? Are you going to be into, investing into things maybe like ML ops, like with the new machine learning ops to see maybe how to make it more efficient, or AI ops that can go ahead and say, make decisions for you, or, maybe even things like slow, like a service level objectives, are we meeting our objectives? We know nobody wants to be, 100% nines, because you can't, because that means that you have no room for improvement, and there's always room for improvement. But, is there, what are your 3 top takeaways? Where are they going to shape you for the next 12 to 24 months? And, and what kind of further investment are you guys looking for, or what are you guys starting to even think about? Because I mean, most companies are starting to think about ML and AI, and even in just ancillary. I've read an article about it, and it sounds interesting. But what your viewpoint on this would be fantastic.
Yeah. So just kind of historically, so there's the learnings that I can talk about a little bit. Is the thing that does not work is saying, here's the rules, here's the mandate, do it, right? You have to say that in a different way. You're still saying that, but the way this works is, so simple things like, how we enabled permissioning, how we made the builds fail. Like you start with warnings and then you make them fail. And even today, our dev doesn't fail. Like you could still build something that's bad. It's just that when you try to deploy to QA, it'll say, that warning is now an error, right? So stuff like that, where we actually, and I think this is just something that I won't claim to be a sage. It just happened that we said, hey, we'll just switch on warnings and then let you guys deal with it. And then the pride took over, right? Hey, I got like 500 warnings. I need to, do something.
Gaming, baby. This is where, like I said, it can be powerful.
Yeah, it was gamified. So that was where we started, and so now everybody is at least aware of, what makes me shine, right? When I say me, it's like my product or whatever. So pick something, and something makes you shine, and that's either that you came with no security flaws, or you came with, certain speed of certain velocity, all of that stuff. So that was where I think our journey is that's still happening. I mean, not everybody understands what it means to be automated. Like, some of the times, if you just scripted it, it's considered automated, but that's not true, right? We have to have certain operational automation. But going from there, we're talking about like the grown up decisions are like SLO. So SLA was already there. SLO, SLI, and some of the other pieces that we want to talk about are, so we set up these tenets that's saying, okay, in order for you to be a certified pipeline, and when gentleman Dwayne, he works on this, and he made this, in order to be a certified pipeline, these are the bars that you have to meet. And so again, it's gamification of the whole thing, but it's a little more, I would say, subjective right now, just because we don't have all the tools. So code and Docker images, we have X-ray, but there's other things that we have to do. We always say, or at least I always say this, you're not deploying, you're just approving, right? The deploy happens
because, no matter what.
Yeah, no matter. Yeah, I mean, well, you can disapprove and it won't deploy, but then it's
right. Once you approve it.
Yeah, the human involvement is only for approvals, not for actual deployments. So
it's like writing a release on a piece of paper, putting it in the fire and letting it go, and saying, at this point, it's already happened. I got to look this way now.
Well, you see these movies, right? The secretary brings a big bunch of papers, and all the boss does is turns the corner and signs those things.
Yeah.
So that's what we want is, you either like you have this big red X or a check, green check, and that's all you need to decide on, because that it's been taken care of. It comes with a cost of, somebody else has to make sure that big check, check mark is believable. But but that's what we're saying. Like one of the tenets is, if you had a check mark and you went ahead and you still got a bug that could have been prevented, then hey, your pipeline fell out of certification, right? And you got to do that again. So yeah, so it's one of those things where you start maintaining a certain level, and unfortunately the bar keeps shifting, because once you're up to this level, we'll make you do better. And but now we have the tools to show you that you're doing better or worse before you get to a point where you get in front of the judges.
It looks like we have a question for John, from John Martin, really quick. It says, is there a shareable enumeration of the in order to be's that are part of this? I would very curious to know what were chosen to be in that list. So I'm assuming what John is asking in terms of like, in orders to be is like in order to be into a production, I'm assuming, and things like that. So in order to be, what are the what are the requirements you have, and also too, this will kind of segue into the next part is, what's your next level of focus behind this on how you can make it better, and or how you can automate it, or what, like I said, your 12 to 24 month roadmap on where you'd like to be, and even beyond that. Including things like the enumeration. Like right now, you might have a smaller checklist. Is there a bigger, is there bigger ones coming that are more automated? Maybe eventually that says, "Yep, these met all the automated tests. It looks good."
Yep. So let's go with the. I'm going to reverse the questions in the next.
Sure, absolutely, please do.
Yeah. So our idea is that we will have each of these steps either become so the idea is to get it out of the dev cycle. So it has to be part of the publish cycle, and it should be something like a product manager or a CIO maybe decides that, hey, I want to switch. So if you call these feature flags, right? The feature flags do that, where you check a box and a feature goes out. In our case, we're talking about our deploy flags, where we say, hey, we're ready to show the customers blah, and they check up. I'm calling it a feature flag, and we do whatever it takes to enable that feature, including deploys. So MLOps is a part of that. I'm going to say we're far away from it right now. We just have other, the growing part of things is still taking up our time,
right?
Growing the practice. But the way that the starting point has been a list of things that we do. And I don't know if I can share that list, but maybe I can ask.
Not asking. I think probably what you could just do is generality.
Yeah.
You could just say,
the generality is, the general thing is we're saying, today, what do we do? So we started with today, what do we do? So-and-so pushes this button, so-and-so pushes this button, these people do these things. And at the end, so-and-so checks these things, right? We took that list, moved that to, okay, automated script to do this, automated script to do that. Right, which basically means that the 20 button became one button or one command line, and then said automate triggers to run that automation. And so we're in that mode where we have a bunch of things that are scripted, but not really triggered, because we have too many if then else's. Like there's a human making a decision saying, oh, you know what, if it's a sunny day and a Monday and this thing passed, then I will deploy it, or something like that. And so we have things where, because we deal with higher ed cycles are, we don't want to push something on a deadline for applications. And it's nothing to do with bugs or anything. I mean, even if you're 100% confident, we have this issue of, it's not an SLA issue, but it's mostly you don't want to disrupt. Well, all right, let me put it bluntly. There are students that wait till the last minute to publish their, or submit their application, right? Some students, but
my son was, I was lucky enough, my son did that early. We actually got one of our first acceptance letters for him, because next year he goes off to college. But
awesome.
I have other friends that they're like, my kid hasn't even looked at anything yet.
But because of that, we basically promised the schools, hey, we're not going to change anything on you. So it's nothing to do with us. It's mostly, telling the schools, giving them a confidence, because they're still in the old mindset, right? Schools upgrade themselves one retirement at a time. That's how it is. So But anyway, so that's the thing. So yeah, so we still have a human making a decision of when to push something to production. And some things we just cannot do today just because infrastructure is the way it is, half legacy, half, half in Kubernetes, half in some COBOL box somewhere. I don't know if you have COBOL yet, but still, but yeah, we have C++ several places.
There you go. I had a customer the other day who was asking me, and they're like, do you guys have Fortran? And I was like, I'm like, let me check where we're at now. I'm like, let me see. Let me see. I think I might have that somewhere. Oh, wait a minute, I don't, because this is 2022. No, so, the sad part is I remember this, right?
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I've watched the I was never a punch card dude, but I have a friend who was, and he always said to me, he's like, if you really want to mess somebody up, he's like, if you saw somebody with their punch cards back in the punch card days, you would literally hit the box of punch cards in the air and then walk away, and you just mess up everything because there was an order. I'm like, but I'm still from the days of the floppy disk and stuff, and watching it evolve. Like, I mean, dating myself, right? I mean, the first set of computers I used was an Apple II back in, here we go, already 1978. Right, when my mother was a teacher and they were like, computers compute, where do they go? We'll give them to a teacher. Right, and but watching the evolution over time. But now with you guys, the thing is that now the one question I have is that, and I really, by the way, I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your day to talk with me, sharing your knowledge on, how you've done things and how you're doing things, because I think it's very essential for people to understand of, a lot of DevOps journeys is, some companies feel alone, others are more community-based and things like that. And that objective sharing between each other really just makes the industry better. So a couple of questions I have is, have you seen do you have any metrics and stuff that you've maybe recorded over time, to say like, are you, you've increased? I know it's always a hard question because a lot of companies are like, our velocity scale and how we do releases is changed as we changed our methodologies and blah, blah, blah. And then on top of that, is there anything that you see or you would like to see us as a platform in the future, things that maybe we could provide you, because we do have a lot of cool stuff coming, like we are going to have active runtime monitoring of components, say in your Kubernetes cluster that you have.
Right.
We are going to have that to say, hey, by the way, that log4j stuff you just ran that report on to say these are all the things affected by that. Hey, just to let you know, it's running in this pod in your cluster in this location. This will be coming. And we're also going to have this thing called JFrog catalog eventually, which will be something interesting too. But neither here nor there. What kind of metrics have you seen, if you have any, number one? Number two, what would be something desirable you might want to see from us in the future?
So as far as metrics go, we have the intent of making those metrics, and we did one of our guys does a lot of this metrics work and figured out, oh, the number of commits means something, right? But it doesn't for everybody, I guess. So we had all of these things so today we're in the spot where we know how to gather number of commits, number of deploys, how many points in story points that you delivered, all of that stuff. We don't know what they mean yet, and that's where we are. So we have a big, here's a graph that went up. Is that good or bad, or should it be going up higher, or is it like flat better than higher? So it's stuff like that, which
you have a giant metric soup.
Yes, we have metric soup. So that I think that's where we are in the journey. Ideally, we have this whole, we need to be at a spot where we have metrics on three types of deliverables: value to customer, so which means mostly features, like I would call those features. There's enablers, which are things that we do to future, like implement some pipeline that then in future makes value to customers be faster. And then just health, so health, wealth, and I don't know what the third one, well-being. So wealth is where you deliver something, you get paid for it. Health is really don't die, right? And then the third one is really all the other stuff that you do to just training and all that. So these three metrics, that interestingly, we won't think, but training is one of those things that can be measured using our JFrog instance, because it tells us how somebody's builds did over time, or how somebody's code changed over time. So we have this thing in our Git repos that we can scan, and SonarQube will tell us that as well, right? So code quality will be there.
Okay.
Process quality is not in there, right? So process quality is in JFrog, and that's what we can measure. I would say that's where we know we can measure from. I don't know what exactly we will look at to make that happen, but it's one of those things that tells us how quickly we go from snapshot to release, stuff like that.
Excellent. And is there anything, like I said, on top of that, what are some, I know that, like, one of the, we only have a few minutes left and stuff. Is there any final thoughts or anything, or any sort of knowledge or any sort of, wisdom, you want to maybe drop on, some of the people starting this journey, or, if they, they look at, like I said, we'll talk about the metric soup, right? Because the metric soup comes from components that are somewhere,
Right.
that you got to kind of, here are different objects that, independently have their own attributes and who they are, right? Like we're
Right.
using celery and maybe some chopped onions and broth and all that, and you bring it together to make the software mix that you have, and part of that's the metric stew of all that information and how you delineate, is but getting to that point, you guys have been through an amazing journey. Like I said, everything from the real true shift left that we joked around before this, of the fact that it was originally compiled by some guy in a cube somewhere, and if we were talking about high availability, it was the redundant guy sitting next to him, named Bob, who is also doing that. That's our HA, and up to now, and you guys are going on this amazing, exquisite path of things, but we have like 3 minutes left. If there's any final thoughts that you have on like encouragement or caveats or anything, please, I would love to hear some of your instilled knowledge.
Oh, absolutely. So this is just personal learning for me, is that we talk about iterating faster in code.
Yeah.
Iterate your processes fast and do it at the grassroots level. That's just like go to talk to the developer and tell him how his day, figure out what his day looks like. And that's helped me immensely, where I get that, the people that are looking at the graphs, charts, and Excel sheets don't get that. And you have to make sure that you're not relying on the graphs, charts, and Excel sheet, at least in the beginning. Like eventually you'll have to get to the graphs, charts, and Excel sheets, but you have to be talking to their developers to make this actually fly.
I love that idea of the grassroots campaign. It's funny is that, that's the way I do with some of our customers. I do town halls, and the town hall is to say, I had a customer last year I did this for, they're like, we only have about a 15% adoption of the platform internally. And I was like, what happens to be the caveat here? What's the bottleneck? What's going on? And he's like, well, I think it's just awareness. Right. And just even having the awareness inside of an organization could be tremendous. So I did a town hall. I talked to them 6 months later, and he's like, we're at 64% adoption now, and it's increasing monthly. And he goes, because a lot of the people that we have didn't even realize this was an option. So the thing is that, like I said, starting off with the grassroots campaign by getting the developers on board and then moving it through the process probably, helps. It's like, the idea of like, now we got everybody in this mentality, and now we just have to make it a thing. And that path can be difficult, but it sounds like you guys have endured as exquisitely over time. I'm sure there's roadmaps. I'm sure there's bumps in the road, and there's times where people pulling their hair out and but at the same time, it's like the culmination of a community really is what every organization is, and working together in that respect is amazing. And I just have to say, we have a minute left. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This has been a wonderful discussion with you. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the wisdom and insight. I hope everybody got something out of this. I will let Courtney take us out.
Yeah, no, I wanted to quickly say thank you again. An hour zooms by when, you're having fun, right? So just a reminder to everyone else, if you have any additional questions from anything you heard today, make sure to email webinars@jfrog.com. That's webinars@jfrog.com. We'll get that to either Bill, Mrinal, or both. Thank you again for both of you for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing everyone in the future, and everyone have a great weekend and the rest of the week.
Thanks everybody for
attending.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.